This is Jeannie Narum, and I'm pleased to welcome you to another of the Learning Spaces Collaboratory webinars that capture the stories coming from the LSC Roundtable and from the Roundtable community about focusing on the future of planning learning spaces. We have two very interesting, distinct but similar stories to talk about today. And I'm pleased to have all of you on, and I'm pleased that we've put together a quite wonderful package for you. So the roundtable that many of you know I'm hoping I'm coming through clearly. The roundtables are really addressing kind of all the questions that need to happen in the planning and design of learning spaces. And this is one of the posters emerging from the first roundtable we had at Georgia Tech. And I just put this up here to introduce this roundtable and to suggest the complexity of moving from the present to the future when planning learning spaces. I sent you a welcome that reminded you that you can submit a chat in the chat box, and your questions will be asked at the end of the formal presentation. We have three learning outcomes that kind of drove us as we were putting together this roundtable, and they're presented here for you. And again, they kind of emphasize the iterative conversations that happens between academics and architects, between academics on the campus in preparation for the architects and then follow up from the architects, and that this is an opportunity for both sides to kind of push the envelope of what if we think about this, what if we think about that, what difference will it make to our community. We have 5 facilitators, academics and architects, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, but in introducing themselves, give us a sense of their reflections about planning learning spaces that emerged as we were working on this webinar, and as they think about what they learned over the years about how learning happens and how planning happens. I think we're going to start with Jim Schwartz from Grinnell. Jim, would you tell us more?
There's a lot of background noise. So this is Jim Schwartz from Grinnell College, and I started working on projects kind of by accident a long time ago at Grinnell as a chemistry faculty member. And I think what I've learned is that there's a great parallel in my mind to this kind of space planning and working with design professionals and the like with research, that you kind of start out with a vision in mind, but along the way you learn a lot of things that you didn't know, and that diverts one somewhat in a really healthy and productive, hopefully productive way to, as you learn from your colleagues and you learn from your design professionals what you really need to do, and a project and its goals evolves over time.
Thank you. Let's follow him with Rick Hines, who's his partner in crime and working on projects at Grinnell.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. Again, this is Rick Hines. I'm a principal with Research Facilities Design, RFD. We're an architectural and engineering firm specializing exclusively in the programming and design of lab facilities of all types. But I have sort of placed a personal career emphasis on undergraduate STEM facilities over the last 25 years. Following Project Kaleidoscope and the Learning Spaces Collaboratory with Jeannie since 1992. The reflections I had in preparing for this were really the importance of including all interested stakeholders, getting the right people to the table at the right time, to hear all the varied perspectives and working towards consensus, and recognizing that everyone won't get everything they ever wanted, but by participating, they'll be able to understand and hopefully endorse and support the final outcome.
Thanks very much, Rick.
Okay.
Is the Clemson mic on?
I think so.
perhaps Clemson could mute his mic? Thank you.
There they go.
Floyd, would you like to give us your reflections about planning learning spaces that emerged from working on this webinar?
Sure. Again, my name is Floyd Klein. I'm an architect with Perkins & Will. I've been designing science, technology, and higher ed facilities for the last 17 years. And as we were putting this together, I just really reflected on the importance of vision and the visioning process when it comes to creating these kind of spaces. No longer can we can't just ask somebody, okay, how do you teach and how do you want this room to look, because we'll be behind from day one. But we really need to envision, our students and the spaces that they learn in and the technology that they use and the different ways that they interface with this world. We need to think about that not just for today, but for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and think about how spaces can accommodate that and accommodate some of the unknowns that we don't know about today. And so that was kind of my big reflection going into this.
Thanks, Floyd. I appreciate your emphasis on moving into the unknown when you're planning these kinds of spaces. Denny, why don't you give us your reflection and thinking about coming from the known to the unknown in planning the Clemson facility?
Sure, Jeannie. I'm Denny Lester. I got here about 2.5 years ago when they had just broken ground on the facility. Can you hear me now?
You are very, very bad.
We sound great
this morning. It worked better this morning.
Stand by.
Okay.
So while they're working on that, let me give you a little bit more background on the conversation and why focusing on academics and architects is so important. What we found in the roundtable is that quite often the architects would say, I didn't understand that this had to happen, or that should be happening, or that is happening on a campus before the architects come to the campus. The attention to facilities, to faculty development, to pedagogical change, and the kind of everything that's happening on a campus all the time before, during, and after attention to learning spaces happen. I think it's quieter now at Clemson, and see what happens now. Denny, you want to start over?
Okay, how does it sound now?
It's better.
Okay. I'm Denny Lester. I've been here for 2.5 years. I got here to help get the building up and running. Very close coordination in terms of lessons learned required not only between the standard architect, owner, and the construction contractor, but really having to bring together the whole campus behind this facility that was going to support all the colleges and schools here, not just one particular college, which I'll elaborate on just a little bit more later.
Barbara, you get the last word.
All right, well, can you hear me? I'm Barbara Spezial. I'm a biology professor here at Clemson. I've been at the lot since about 6 months before it opened, so almost 2 years now. And my recent experience is learning about how architects think has been fascinating, and I very much enjoyed working with Perkins & Will, and especially with Floyd. We've done a couple of presentations together. I'll have to say that assembling this webinar was a nice opportunity to delve back into the process that led up to the building of the Watt Center, because I wasn't here for all of that, and it turned out to be a very interesting story and a fortuitous coalescing of needs, wants, and opportunities, and I hope we'll bring out some of that in this webinar.
There's still trouble at the Clemson end, and maybe you can work on that while, Floyd, why don't you maybe start the story of the Clemson Center while they continue to work on the sound, please?
Okay, sure. I probably can't do it as well as Barbara would, but again, this was a facility that started years ago when the university just had a vision of trying to better serve its students and providing a facility for innovation and advanced learning, a facility that they didn't have anywhere before. And so the story begins with the president and the provost going on a road trip and, you know, trying to engage stakeholders and people who want to be part of this experience and opportunity. And the named donor got involved, and they really worked at pulling together resource, pulling together the deans of the university and various, you know, faculty member and representatives around the university to come together and put together this university-wide resource called the Watt Family Innovation Center.
That's a good start. We'll go back to Denny and Barbara now.
Yeah, I think actually Floyd, can you hear us now?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think Floyd actually got that story down pretty well, but the key to this was that conversations between Clemson's administrators and the donor all, you know, coalesced around the central theme, and the mission emerged. Now, can we advance? Let's see where we are. The mission emerged. Oh, no, go back, so we don't want to do that. Okay, go back to the Clemson slide. And so the mission emerged that we'll talk about a little later. Well, I'll wait until we get to the next couple slides. Floyd pretty much did the introduction.
Thank you.
Clemson, sorry.
About Grinnell.
Okay.
Jim, would you like to talk about the Grinnell vision and what your project is about?
So our overall driving force was to really provide an excellent undergraduate learning experience for our students, to encourage them to be science professionals and to understand science. And we were particularly attentive to trying to do a better job with students who were traditionally underrepresented in science. And so the goal was to really rethink our curriculum and our pedagogy and how to build community, and then integrate what our space planning within that to try to overall improve our science programs.
So you can see we have two quite different projects, but attention to the learner and learning and kind of what they will do when they leave the campus is, so now we're going to turn the story over to Clemson, and they're going to kind of talk through their whole story about the what, why, and how, and of serving their vision, meeting their vision by the way they plan the spaces and how the spaces are used. So I think Barbara and Jenny are going to begin.
Okay, so as Floyd indicated, the conversations between Clemson administrators and the donors allowed us to come forward with a sort of a unique mission for the Watt Center. And the Watt Center is Clemson's newest academic building, but we also see ourselves as a prototype for the campus. So the Watt Center was envisioned as a catalyst for cross-disciplinary interactions among campus entities, but then especially with outside industries. And all of this was intended to take place in an interactive, technology-rich, very modern learning environment, which we'll tell you about. One of the interesting things, nope, not yet, Denny. One of the interesting things about the Watt is that we're not affiliated with any one department or college, and that's very deliberate. We are very welcoming of students and faculty from all disciplines. On this slide, what you'll see is that we have projects ranging from engineering to the humanities. Up in the corner, it looks like they're playing tennis in the building, but that's actually a project monitoring brain waves as people go through various activities. In this case, it was tennis. They've done many other activities. On the bottom of the slide, we see teachers from English and from the nursing department. In the middle, we have an engineering class. So what we look at the Watt as being is a place for, we call it creative collisions among people from different disciplines. Next slide tells you something else about creative collisions. The Watt's location was actually a very deliberate consideration in planning. In putting the Watt up, we actually established a new academic heart for the campus. The Watt sits, you see the Watt in yellow sign there. The Watt sits on a green that is flanked by the Watt on one side, the library to the north, and our Academic Success Center, which is for student tutoring and student assistance on the far side of the green. So the intention is that this is a very student-focused area. It's very different from our other areas on campus, which are mostly for teaching. This is actually a student engagement area, and that was deliberate. The green is going to be landscaped soon, and it will also become very much a student hub. Go to the next slide. And in assembling the building itself, Clemson wanted to build not for the present, not to backfill a need, but to build for the future. We're looking at the generations to come, far beyond the students we have now. And so, as we'll talk about, it has very innovative architecture and furnishings, all of which are very flexible to adapt to future needs that we don't know what they are yet. We are very committed to state-of-the-art technology. All of our computer and technology systems in the building are pushing the edge of what students have had at Clemson and what they will be doing both at Clemson and in their future careers. We also see the Watt as being a prototype for other buildings on campus. We're the first classroom academic building that's been built in a while here, but as the university gets into building more classroom-type buildings, and we have several on the horizon, we want them to look at the Watt as a model. So we see ourselves as something of an experiment. Okay, now go to the next slide. One of the things that we do that pushes the envelope here in the Watt is we host Clemson's undergraduate research program. And we have a program called Creative Inquiry, in which we immerse undergrads in projects, in team-based projects that extend over multiple semesters. And many of these projects address real-world problems, both within the university, within the disciplines, and also internationally. We have more than 5,000 students a year involved in this. I put a couple of pictures up. The top picture is just what students collaborating on a project, but below that you can see a picture, a bird's eye view of our student makerspace, which itself was a creative inquiry project. The next one is a group that had been working on wheels that they use for vehicles that go out into outer space, so NASA-based problem. We also have a number of international projects. Along the bottom, you see some projects that are working in Tanzania, Nicaragua, and Haiti, everything from developing medical devices for low-cost medical devices for use out in the field to building and maintaining water systems. I will note that we won the 2016 award for undergraduate research accomplishments for the breadth of our creative inquiry program. Danny, next slide, and I think that's you go on now.
Great. Well, thank you, Barbara. Well, I'm sure as you saw some of the photos already, one of the main architectural features of the building here, and it starts from outside and it permeates throughout the building, is transparency. And so that was very much an important factor in how we designed the interior of the building and what distinctive features that we put in it as far as the lighting goes, the media lighting on the outside, which is an outstanding way to advertise what's going on campus, what's going on in the building. We put in flooring and demountable wall systems that allow us to change up the rooms literally over the weekend, which allows us to tailor them to the size of the classes, the type of format, or the layout that the faculty members would like to promote collaboration within their classrooms. We also put in a lot of high-capacity networks, not only wired networks, but wireless networks to promote collaboration through connection to the devices that are throughout the building, from large screen displays in the atrium to the auditorium to the classrooms themselves with content, sound, that can be shared throughout the building, a very innovative design. And Barbara talked about the makerspace. We really try to create spaces, though, that allow faculty and students to come in and make them the way that they want them to promote whatever type of research or academic support activities they're involved in. In addition, just to drill down a little bit more, you can see some of these classrooms on the right-hand side of the slide. The upper two are workspaces and can serve as small classrooms and larger classrooms. And then the bottom two photos are the atrium and just a small project room. But in the middle there, you see this room that we refer to as a command and control center. That particular room allows us to connect up all the different rooms in the building that have connectivity capability, but it also serves as a way to set up recording, to set up lighting, to adjust volumes and connections that we have not only within the building, but also outside the building. So very much emphasis on integrated technology as almost like a test bed for learning so that we can help inform the decisions that are made in other construction projects of what really should go into the room based on what they're trying to achieve in the rooms. And this gets back to Barbara's comments about the Creative Inquiry Program. It's about cross-disciplinary emphasis. It's about not only bringing our college together, but it's also building the relationships with our government and industry sponsors, which played a big role in how this building got designed as well. But it gets back to the most important criteria that we asked with something coming into the building is how does it support our students? What's it going to do for both our undergraduate students and our graduate students to create a better learning environment for them? And then the last thing I'd like to touch on, which is really a critical feature of the design that we did with the technology in the building, was we're extending our campus, you might say, to key locations around the state of South Carolina as a priority to have our students perceive their environment as one that's not just on campus, but it extends not only statewide, but globally through what we call collaborative work suites, which we've actually set up operations with distant learning to Charleston. We have a facility that looks very similar to a typical classroom in the Watt Center at the University of South Carolina Innovation Center in Columbia that ties in with academic and research activities there. So when we use the word ecosystem, we look at it as not only our internal system, but all the touch points that we have outside the building. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Floyd, who will pick up on more of the details of the building.
Okay, thanks, Denny. And so what I'll do, I'll talk a little bit more about how all the things that Denny and Barbara talked about started to materialize in terms of physical built form. The program for the building was developed around the desire for flexible program space as well as high-profile course space. The blue that you see on the plan is some of the flex space represented by classrooms, meeting rooms, and project labs. And then some of the other colors like the green on the level 1 and other spaces are more of the core support functions, the public functions, the surrounding things to help reinforce the flexible nature of the building. One thing the university also had was a strong desire for a building image that gave a nod to Clemson's past, but more importantly looked to Clemson's future by providing modern features like glass walls and other things that you wouldn't see other places on campus. And they were very intent on not building any more old-fashioned buildings on campus. Along those same lines, the university president at the time also provided a mandate that the facility display some form of electronic architecture, and that was a new term to us. We had to figure out what that meant. But he wanted this architecture to serve, electronic architecture to serve as an outward physical manifestation of the high-tech, innovative learning activities that were happening inside. So since there was so much technology inside, how do we display that on the building and use it to communicate to the students, to the campus, the awesome things that are taking place within. The university also wanted to use the building to communicate the university's strong brand, while also putting innovation on display for the hundreds of visitors that come in daily, as well as the students that cycle through this building each and every day. That brand experience begins at the heartbeat of the facility, which is this atrium space for this image and the last image. It's a multifunctional space for events, demonstrations, poster board sections, events, and it's kind of a connecting member that connects all the different aspects of the building. The university also set a goal that the building must inspire the freshman general engineering students to improve the department's retention rate and inspire undergraduate innovation. Providing technology, views, and natural light were big parts of the solution, and you kind of get that sense as you look at these views. Informal learning spaces were desired throughout the building, where students can pretty much walk up to any informal space that's outfitted with electronics and wirelessly connect without having to pull a cord or anything like that. They can just go their laptop or iPhone or whatever and connect directly to a display and instantly collaborate, which is a interesting feature that we've never done before until this project. Formal learning spaces. We have formal learning spaces that range from high-tech 72-student active learning classrooms down to small learning spaces that double as classrooms or project labs. Again, these spaces are cladded with technology while also providing the opportunity for students to write on the glass walls, where we have writable wall surfaces on solid walls, the furniture themselves. You know, pretty much anything is used for collaboration in this building. Because this facility is a university resource geared towards innovation and academic learning, the variety and character of space forms out of the need to meet a diversity of needs throughout the day, while also accommodating the need for larger change from semester to semester. So we were given this mandate in the project that this building needs to be flexible and needs to be able to accommodate overnight change. And so while it may not necessarily be overnight, over a weekend, this building can reconfigure pretty quickly to meet either a need for a special seminar or a need for a special project that's coming down the pipes. And then this last slide, you know, the team worked really hard together to consider every surface and every aspect of this building as a tool for collaboration and learning. And seeing these activities like you see in these pictures, you know, really start to stand as a testimony to how students are really using these spaces. And these are things that you see every day when you go in and out of the building. And, you know, Denny and Barbara, I can pass it back to you guys. I don't know if you have a story that you all want to share about this space. I know we had talked about before how professors were using, you know, the tables and the tools to do certain projects, and kind of gave them new opportunities and avenues to teach and conduct projects.
I think one of the interesting things in the building, now we've been in operation for 3 semesters, so it's been really interesting to watch how the faculty have adapted their teaching styles. When they first came here, they were really using our building the same way they would use a normal smart classroom, with just PowerPoint-type slides on a single screen. Well, most of our classrooms have 2, 3, up to 6 screens. We also have portable screens we can roll around the building. Now, the same faculty I saw a year ago just using PowerPoint slides. I walk in now, I don't have to walk in, the walls are glass, we can see right through. But as I walk by the classrooms, what we see is they might have a PowerPoint indeed on a portion of one of the screens, and then they might have a spreadsheet on the screen. Then they might be showing a video on another screen. Students might be putting their work up on a 4th screen. So they're using all of this technology. I don't know how they would ever adapt if they went back to another classroom. And at the same time they're doing that, they're beginning to use all of our collaborative software. So they are adapting their teaching styles, and the students are adapting their classroom collaborative styles to fit the opportunities. This really is a sort of a build it and they will come, and build it and they will use it opportunity. Denny, do you have anything?
No, I'd just say that the idea of creating a place where you bring together research and academics and undergraduate students and graduate students, they're looking for excitement. They're looking for a way to facilitate and show the material that they've created to share that information, to receive feedback from others. And what we found is that the environment we've created here, it is evolving, where people are changing the way they interact with each other. And a very key aspect of what this architecture has allowed us to do.
I think this is a marvelous, marvelous story. And we will come back to it at the end with some questions that have already been posted about the whiteboard tables, about the spillover effects of the Watts Center to redesigning the library, about the decisions about features most important. And we'll probably answer those, but I want first at the end of the webinar, but I'd like first to have Rick and Jim make some comments about this experience and what you thought about it after we have been working together over the past few days. Rick, would you like to start?
Well, I think obviously the Clemson facility is a beautiful modern facility. I'm very impressed with it. I guess one of my thoughts while they were going through the story was thinking about how the facility has impacted student and perhaps faculty behavior, and in their conclusion a minute ago they've kind of addressed with it, but I don't know if there's any elaboration on that of how students have really reacted to the facility, particularly the ones that were there before the new facility was open and had experience with the old facility.
Barbara, any response to that question?
Oh, no, old facility, and we didn't replace anything. We are new, but I'll tell you how students have reacted to the building. Students have flocked here in droves. So they'd be flocking from, I'll give you two examples. One, we had 2/3 of our freshman engineers taking their first classes in this building. The other third of the students are taking it in probably what is one of the oldest buildings on campus, probably the polar opposite of the Watt. We haven't done any formal studies to assess the difference, but students are telling us that they love this building they love the natural light. They like the casual collaboration spaces that we provide. They like all these little nooks all across the building, all of which are technology enriched. So students are very, very positive about the building. They always tell us this is their favorite building on campus. It helps we have a coffee shop downstairs, but just about every building does now, so that's not what's doing it.
Jim, do you have any comments?
I think it's very impressive of the design team and the campus-based people work together to create a facility that really wasn't, it was driven by a vision, but it wasn't driven by, it sounds like I need this. They've actually built the need as part of the facility and embraced a variety of technologies, including things that pull things together, obviously digital technologies, but I just love the simple, but I've never seen it implemented before, technology of tabletop whiteboards.
I agree. I think those are intriguing to all of us, especially those who have been watching this evolve over the years. So I'm now going to turn to the Grinnell story, and then we'll have some cross conversations. And so I think that I think Jim is going to start with the tale of projects at Grinnell, and these are going to be different, but I invite you all to kind of be alert to the similar questions, challenges, and opportunities presented at Grinnell to those presented at Clemson. So, Jim, it's all yours.
So when I interviewed for a faculty position in the chemistry department in February of 1980, I was impressed with the creativity of the chemistry faculty and how they had run residential rain gutters crisscrossing the laboratory spaces to collect the water that was leaking in through the roof and drain it off into sinks so they could continue to use the spaces. And a few years went by, and I eventually got tenure, and I became the department chair, and there was an opportunity to write a grant proposal to renovate some research and research training spaces, i.e. upper-level laboratory spaces, that at Grinnell were in a building that was built in the early 50s, and maybe the next slide, that looked basically like this. So they had been designed as introductory chemistry labs and converted to student faculty research labs, but they were tired. So there was an opportunity to write a grant proposal, and we got the proposal. We got the grant to renovate some spaces, and as soon as we got into it, we realized that we were in a bit over our heads and we needed some help. We needed technical help on how to design modern laboratories, but importantly, we needed not just to think through how to replace that hood with a modern fume hood, but to think through what we wanted the spaces to do in terms of serving our students and faculty educationally. And besides, this was about probably less than 10% of the building that we were renovating. The rest of it was in similar condition, and we needed to develop a long-term plan for the rest of our science facilities. So at that point, we identified and found Rick Hines with Research Facilities Design, and he joined our team.
Right, so that was, I believe, in 1989. So when Jim's team was awarded the NSF Academic Research Infrastructure Grant, it was to renovate existing space for chemistry student research. The project also included renovating their existing chemistry stockroom to correct some problems with ventilation, to create a separate office for the lab manager and so on. But I think one of the most important things that came out of that was it really got the ball rolling as the science division got excited about the possibilities offered by improved facilities. They could see what could be done with an older building, and they were determined to start thinking about long-term planning for the sciences.
So we got that project completed and rolled into starting to think about what we needed to do in the longer term. And we started with a wing of a building that was built in 1951 and another wing of the building built at the same time that was plywood and a slab-on-grade structure that was supposed to be temporary. And then an addition to the building that was added on in 1964, and those housed biology, chemistry, physics, and a small science library. Go to the next slide. And then in the yellow, you can see there's a wing, L-shaped wing on the right-hand side that was added on into 1987 that has housed computer science, mathematics, and psychology. That brought all of our sciences together. So that was our starting condition. We really then moved to try to figure out what this educational vision was that we had and to develop a plan to really support the idea of making our courses more like doing science, at trying to build our capacity to support undergraduate research, and really importantly to develop spaces that would support community among the faculty and the students and a sense of belonging on the part of the students. Our eyes were bigger than our budget, and even when trying to be austere, we realized that we needed to break the project into two phases, one that we would implement as one and one that we would implement later.
Right, so in order to help facilitate that process, I got re-engaged in like 1993 to work with the science community to create a master plan program for the sciences to address some of the spaces like you see on the screen, sort of the before picture. At that point, the 1980s wing was still almost brand new and housed computer science, math, and psychology. Those departments felt their needs were being met and really chose not to be involved. They thought they were all set. So programming progressed for biology, chemistry, and physics through a series of iterative multi-day workshops on campus that we usually started with the planning committee meeting, followed by departmental breakout sessions, and ending with an exit session with the committee again to discuss initial findings, issues that required attention at a higher level, and discuss next steps in the process. So these workshops were about 4 to 5 weeks apart, included sessions with other campus stakeholders, including students, faculty from other disciplines, facilities and physical plant personnel, et cetera. And as the master plan program was being completed, the college recognized it really wasn't practical to accomplish the entire project in one phase. So the group worked to analyze the space list and prioritize the program into what they considered to be most important to accomplish in phase one.
So with that program in hand, we did a national search for an architect who then would take that as a problem statement and help design a facility. and we were very fortunate to attract Halliburton Root to the project, and I believe James Baird, the principal in charge, is on the call today, and happy to have him be a part of this whole project. So they ultimately helped us put into space what our aspirations were, and remembering that our aspirations were substantially larger than what we were going to be able to do. And just a few things to show some of the things that we accomplished. On the next slide shows the picture that you just saw previously of an old classroom with tiered tablet arm chairs, and then a new classroom that we spent lots of time arguing about before we came to the right concept as a tiered classroom where the students are sitting in 2 tables per tier and they can engage actively and not just sort of face the forward. We designed teaching labs that were more like research labs for 2 reasons. One is we wanted the research to more effectively to use the space in the summertime when we didn't have classes, but we also wanted our classes to be more like research experiences. We wanted spaces like the one above where students could then show off to the whole campus their posters of their accomplishments, of research-like accomplishments in classes or their research projects. We also, through that process, developed a kind of master plan for the second phase of the project, so we knew roughly where we're going to go with the project, and I think Rick's going to talk about that a bit.
Right, so the phase 1 project did include some new construction that wrapped around the west and south sides of the existing building, presenting a new face to the campus quad while creating a more welcoming entry. So the photo on the left was the prior entrance from the south that Jim talked about as like entering the black abyss. And I think Halliburton Root did a great job of maintaining some campus context with the brick and all, but presenting a much more friendly and welcoming face to the quad, and a lot more transparency, windows and natural light than the existing building had.
I'll just interrupt here and to say that I think one of the things that happened is we were anticipating adding on yet another wing to this building, and what Halliburton Root brought us was the vision to really engulf and wrap around the whole thing and re-envision the entire complex.
And I think one of the smart things that Jim and his colleagues did was they maintained that temporary 50s wing even at the completion of phase 1, because they felt as long as they had that phase 2 would eventually happen. So in addition to presenting the new face to the quad, having more transparency, natural light, and space for faculty offices and so on, much of the existing building was renovated for improved teaching labs. So again, you see a before and after picture on an introductory chemistry lab where the older labs had long peninsula benches which didn't really provide safe egress or easy circulation for the faculty to get up next to the students. There were sightline issues and all, so the renovated labs, even in existing space, plus with painting the exposed ceilings white, really opened the space up a bit more with improved sightlines, safe egress, and the ability to move through the building and work collaboratively. Similarly, the organic chemistry lab, similar sightline issues and circulation, egress, and ADA issues that were much improved in the new design. One of the things, we've done lots of labs like this since, but this was the first time where we really reimagined organic chemistry, where students' assigned space was their half of an 8-foot fume hood. So that meant the center of the room could be different with shared access to balance those instrumentation, sinks, and so on, and write-up and small group discussion space. So the middle of the room didn't just have all the benches lined up facing the same direction.
And I think one of the things that we learned from this is just doing things like bringing color in makes a big difference. The students just are happier to be in nice-looking spaces than drab old spaces. So this worked so well, we made a convincing case that 5 years after the first phase was completed that we should begin planning the second phase in the hopes that we would construct it, which we did, and it ended up opening roughly 10 years after the first phase opened. And it became so one of the things that we learned along the way is one of my colleagues, David Lopato, started assessing what students learn when they engage in research experiences and in research-like experiences. And what we found is what the students reported that they learned are the kind of higher order cognitive skills that employers and we that promote liberal education really desire them to have. So they were observing as they were engaging in these experiences, they were learning just the kinds of things that we wanted them to learn. So that also helped us give us some assessment data and the impetus to try to then press harder on the accelerator of converting our spaces to really facilitate learning science by doing science.
Right.
So our colleagues in computer science, math, and psychology noticed all of this and were participating in discussions about how to change the curriculum and recognized that the spaces that weren't that old that they had moved into about 10 years earlier, or 12 years earlier, I guess, at this point, really didn't support that kind of a vision. They wanted to be a part of this, and so we decided the right thing to do was to really bring the whole science division, including the beyond just biology, chemistry, and physics, into this project. So we then planned the second phase. So the first phase of the project, if you can remember what it looked like before, shows a wrap around the south and the west sides. And then, Rick, you want to talk about how that evolved from there?
Right. So on the right, you see the kind of L-shaped wing where it was the 80s wing for math, computer science, and psychology. So the original concept developed by the team was that the up to the north where the existing sort of temporary 50s wing had been there for 40 or 50 years would get most of the attention then in the phase 2 concept. What actually evolved then, due to the success of phase 1 and the desired inclusion of math, computer science, and psychology, was a new concept for phase 2. And you can see that the project expanded to the east and to the south to engage that 80s wing, so it became an integral part of an integrated STEM complex that I think everybody feels good about. So the mixing of disciplines, the multi and interdisciplinary character of the resulting spaces, the sprinkling of student study interaction spaces, both open and social and more private and contemplative throughout the building was a big success. And I think a lot of that was due to the continuity and leadership that Jim provided in working with his colleagues in a leadership position as the faculty shepherd that led to an even more efficient and effective process for phase 2 planning and design, but with the same A&E team.
Yeah, we were very fortunate to be able to do these really projects roughly a decade apart with essentially the same architectural and engineering team who really learned a lot through the process. We learned a huge amount from them, and we worked very well together. I think some of the key things that we learned from the project is that the teaching and research spaces work well, and in particularly they work well because we view them similarly, not just that they're completely different things, but that what we want to accomplish and the kind of learning that needs to occur in them is in common, and we share them back and forth regularly. Our gut feeling was that creating some small, non-specialized spaces for students to kind of hang out and study has even been more important than we thought. Our students really, really like those, and in particular, they tend to like them as like spaces that aren't large with lots of people in them, but smaller spaces. And as I'm working on another academic building project right now, and we were meeting with our architecture team and talking about some of these things, one of them, after a conversation, said, "Oh, I get it, Grinnell likes Nookie." So here's some examples of those kinds of spaces. And really what we've learned in the science building has substantially influenced the design of other buildings on our campus, including athletic facilities, a campus center, and in a humanities and social studies project that's underway right now.
Yeah. So all in all, for me, this has been a very satisfying experience over a long period of time, both professionally and personally. I learned that clients can be more than clients. They can become lifelong friends. It really reinforced my career focus on lab planning for undergraduate STEM facilities. And it's helped me understand the importance of, again, asking the right questions, making sure the right people are at the table at the right times, and the really dramatic impact that pedagogy can and should have on science facilities planning.
So, and I guess I would say that these projects have been the most challenging and most satisfying experiences in my professional life. In part, I can walk out of my office and just see the impact that the spaces are having on what our students and faculty members are doing and how they're involved with one another. A few years ago, we did some focus groups with second-year science students to ask them about their sense of belonging in science and how they were learning and how various support structures were working. And after that was over, the person who was from the Science Education Resource Center who did the focus groups, I called her and I said, "Ellen, how did it go?" And she said, "It went pretty well. I learned a lot." But she said, "I couldn't get many of my questions answered because the students wouldn't stop talking about the impact of the building." And that was not something that she had intended to ask them about. So that was a very positive thing. And I just want to show a slide of how this plays itself out on a project that we're working on right now, and that is another addition renovation project in addition to a Carnegie Library and another historic building on our campus that will bring all of our social studies and humanities together. So we're trying to celebrate the old building while building on new additions, and then the kind of image on the right is thinking about how do we bring together in interdisciplinary nodes faculty offices, student-faculty research space, classrooms, and other kinds of informal student spaces to bring them together to be a really exciting space and to provide the same kind of experience on a broader part of our campus. And one of the things that I reflect on in comparing the building at Clemson and ours is at Clemson, you started out with the intent that this was going to be a university building, that it was really going to serve cross-disciplines. In Grinnell, we started out with the idea and very much focused on this was a cross-science disciplines building, but what we found is that our students, no matter what courses they're taking and what their majors are spending lots of time in our science building because it's providing the kinds of spaces that really support their learning and their community.
Thank you very much, Grinnell. And I'm going to ask for comments from the Clemson team about the contrast or the similarities and the kind of mutual embracing of spaces for students in which students begin to feel like they're at home. I think Jim started out, I know Grinnell started out with the sense that they wanted students to feel like this was the campus living room. And so, Dennis, maybe we'll start with you and Barbara and then ask Floyd to give some comments.
Sure. You know, one of the questions I did have that's related to this, and I'd like to elaborate on it a little bit more with my answer, is Rick and Jim, what kind of reactions have you gotten from the students with regard to the before and after of your building?
Go ahead, Jim.
It's really hard because these projects take such a long time. And in both projects, we renovated and added on over a period of time. And so many of the students actually lived through some pretty tough renovations and saw it happening. But they've been great adventurers and pioneers, and I think they love it. The most common, one thing I guess I can say is when alumni come back, they just go, wow, I can't hardly believe that we're in the same spaces that we were in before, and they really see the value of, the potential value of it.
Rick, do you have any response to that? Or shall we, Barbara, do you have a question or comment or applause for Grinnell?
Well, actually, applause. I'm delighted to see you making developing your research space with such an eye toward having students take ownership of it. The fact that you are renovating space student research, and that you're looking at student classes and research as more about doing science than actually reading about it and observing it. I know that's everywhere we're supposed to be right now, and I know David's a great influence on all of that, Dave Lupato. We never did advertise ourselves to be the campus living room, but our students do treat us as their home, and it sounds like your building is that too. I think it's pretty impressive that you have non-science students coming into a science building, and as a scientist myself, I would look at that as an opportunity to sort of seduce them into either taking science classes or getting involved in science topics. So if you're not doing it already, maybe put up some posters, have some displays, and let the non-science kids know a little bit about the excitement of science.
In our work with Project Kaleidoscope, and previously in Project Kaleidoscope, we've also planning teams to begin with the question of what do they want their student reaction. Again, it's a similar question to which Barbara just responded. But I remember one conference where one table team said we want our students to become as agile and adaptable as we want our spaces to be, and another conference where the people reported that our planning team the goal of our planning team was for the students to enter into the space and say, wow, they designed this just for me. And I think both of the stories that we've heard about today have perhaps some element of those student responses built into intuitively or explicitly. We have some really lovely questions, some very specific and some more general. I'd like to start with the maybe the discussion from Christopher Chu. In your discussion between architects and staff to develop schemes of design, how did you conduct it? Was it a large collaborative effort that included other teaching staff? Or were there several small groups discussions or back and forth? So just how did it work? So since, let's start with Clemson responding to that and then have Grinnell add on to their response. Clemson, would you like to begin?
Sure. Let me comment on that too, and Floyd, you can jump in. What was really basic every week were operator, architect, and construction contractor meetings, which were pretty much the primary means of working through status reviews, some of the finer details or whatever. But what was so critical was having additional meetings where the AV contractors were working with the furniture people, that are working with the building constructors, working with the architect, and give a lot of credit to Floyd for the leadership that he exhibited during those times to help bring these organizations together and keep them moving so that they really, we didn't end up with a lot of disconnects, you might say, between what we envisioned this building looking like and what it actually came to be.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. I can just add to that. Go ahead.
Comment, Floyd, way at the beginning of your involvement, how did you arrive at even start this conversation about vision?
For me, you know, I've been involved with the project from the day we pursued or interviewed for the project. And so when we got hired on, Clemson had already had this big picture notion of kind of what they wanted to do. It was just, but it was very lofty and was kind of out there and didn't have a whole lot of legs. They had engaged another team to put together a basic feasibility study to bring some things together. I know they had various stakeholder group meetings where they, as part of that session, met with each individual college, and they talked about the needs of each college, and you know, they met with the deans and the chairmen. And so when we got into our phase of the project, we kind of continued but kind of revamped that process, and we really broke down the process into small stakeholder groups. And then we had an oversight committee that kind of had a representative from each of those stakeholder groups. So we were able to meet with the various colleges. We were able to meet with the IT folks. We were able to meet with engineering folks. We were able to meet with different stakeholder groups to pull their thoughts and their visions together and start to roll that all up into one vision. But we always had that oversight committee, a smaller kind of steering committee group that would make the final decisions and kind of etch in stone, you know, the final directions for the project.
I think this is one of the strongest messages coming out of the roundtables that we are having about all the backhoeing, the plowing the field that needs to happen on a campus before they bring the design professionals in. And some of you may have participated in other roundtables where we talk about the yardstick of planning, and that will be kind of a thread woven quite strongly, visibly in, that would be materials that we are assembling from the roundtables, which we are calling a blueprint for planning. I'm going to take the executive privilege here and go to the last question that has been posed. Fiona is from Brazil, and she was, Deanne was in our, she's been a graduate student in architecture at Howard, and she participated in our roundtable at George Washington University. Greetings to you. And her question is about, we've been talking a lot about the learners. She wants to know how it affected the professors, teachers. So, what difference has it made to the professors at Grinnell, to Clemson? I don't know who wants to start, Jim? We'll let you start.
It's made a huge difference. One is just mechanically the kind of things that one can do in terms of creating learning experiences for the students in well-designed classrooms that allow you to engage them rather than them just watching, in teaching labs that allows one to do a lot more, say, research or research-like kinds of projects within the labs, really opens up the possibilities. I guess I would just wind back and to say, I'm 65. I was a youngster when we started these projects, and so almost all of our faculty members didn't experience the old. And I think when they came here to interview for a job and to start their job, the building sent a message to them about what kinds of things they wanted to, you know, what was expected and what they could do at Grinnell. And it's just a huge culture change.
So you want your faculty to be as agile and adaptable as your students?
They better be.
Dennis? Danny, or
okay. Yeah, and I'll talk about our faculty here. I already talked about the fact that the faculty have embraced the technology in their teaching, but they've also embraced it in the way they interact with their students. We have some collaborative software that allows a lot of different things that you wouldn't have somewhere else. One of them is you can actually have students sitting at a table with their laptops, and they can broadcast the contents of their laptops to the screens. And some of the screens you can have up to 2 laptop images showing at the same time, so students can sit there and compare their work. A teacher, because there's a big, a wide sight line in the classroom, a professor can look around the room and see something like 24 or 30 different ways of handling any one project or topic that they throw out. That's been interesting. We also have a lot of distance learning capabilities, and we haven't talked about that. We're finding out there are a lot of faculty who want to teach their class, but simultaneously ship it out to an audience in a distance location, and then have that distance audience interact. I think that's a future for education that a building like this is really built for. We're actually able to anticipate the coming model for higher education, because it's not going to be the same as the model we have now.
Yeah, and maybe let me piggyback that on a little bit. When I first got here, my biggest challenge was to go out to the deans, the associate deans, the department chairs, and the faculty to get them interested in the building. And when I engaged the faculty in particular, the first question was, where's my office going to be? Well, since we are run under the provost's office and we cut across all the colleges and schools, they weren't going to have an office here. So some of them kind of backed away from the get-go because they weren't going to be able to set up shop here totally. But we set up individual engagements with the faculty. We got them weighted into the technology. And then, of course, the students, they jumped on the technology very quickly. But the faculty took a little while, spin up, and then we've seen them pretty much take the baton and take it to where they wanted to go with it.
Thanks. And I think let's start with Clemson and then go back to Grinnell. There's a question here about taking what you've learned, and I think Jim's alluded to this already, what you're learning from this project and kind of having it sprinkle across, influence the planning of repurposing spaces perhaps, or creating new spaces on a campus. Several of the people on this webinar are thinking about responsible for general spaces on campus or thinking about libraries and classroom spaces. So how does your work influence thinking of campus? Clemson, we'll start with you and then Grinnell.
I'll start. I'll tell you that we have new buildings planned. And one of the things we did is we have a new business building probably going up in the next couple of years. A number of the faculty who would potentially be in that new building, they came and they taught in our spaces our first semester, and they have since. But what they're doing is seeing what they want to do. It would be nice if you start having an innovative space on campus and you're planning on building new buildings, have the people who are going to use the new buildings try out your spaces. See what it is about the new spaces that they like or don't like. I think that's a little bit better than jumping into something and finding out in the end you don't like it. We have had faculty here who have had to change how they teach. Our building's not really set up for standing in front of the classroom and just lecturing. Our building is better for collaborative learning. So it's going to change the way faculty teach, but it will also adapt with them.
Yeah, and I would say too, what is kind of critical is that you have an AV design contractor, or if you have your own organic capability at your institution, is that you'd like to see them have broad breadth of experience from really sophisticated type IT and AV solutions to ones that are pretty basic. And so they've already got a fairly good perspective on how things work for different environments that you're trying to create. And we've kept the AV contractor that we had for this building is also working with the new business building to be able to pass on lessons learned and help them get a feel for what they're trying to achieve.
Jim?
Opportunity to learn from one phase to the other phase, and I'll just mention one thing that we learned that our James Baird and Rick Hines both pushed us to try to provide more visibility into our teaching and research spaces, whether those were classrooms or labs, both to bring natural light into internal spaces, but also to show what was going on in the building. And there was a lot of hesitation on the part of faculty, so we did a bit of it in the first phase. And within a year of that opening, other people who were staunchly against it were mad because they didn't get it. So in the second phase, we did a lot more of that, and on our humanities and social studies building, we are doing yet more of it. It's accelerating to see the visibility of what's going on. And I just would comment, kind of picking up on one of your comments earlier, that a few days ago I gave a tour of a high school student who was thinking about applying to Grinnell next year, and she had gotten the kind of standard campus tour and walked quickly through buildings, and so we did a little bit longer tour and looked at some things, and she saw the student faculty research posters on the wall and in looking into the labs. And I said at the end, I said, I hope this really helped you. And she said, this was like coming into the family room on Christmas morning.
What a lovely comment. I'm going to quote you from that.
Yeah.
So let's talk. I'm going to keep pushing the envelope a little bit about pushing the envelope and I know you kind of bits and pieces respond to this, kind of what's the next big thing beyond even what are your dreams for the humanities and social studies complex? Jim, that's kind of your beyond what you have going now? And then Clemson, where's the envelope for you? Jim?
I would say there are three large things. One of them is really critically important but kind of mundane in that our existing humanities and social studies classrooms are designed circa 60 years ago, where students sit at tablet armchairs in straight rows facing forward, and there's less. We are more than doubling up the square feet per student in those rooms, I mean the rooms that will do them, so that we can have mobile furniture or students working in groups doing a whole variety of things. They're much more flexible. That's kind of mundane, but it really is important to do. I think that'll be critically important. Another aspect is providing students. We're really trying to encourage students well beyond the sciences to engage in research in the context of courses or as independent projects, and providing spaces for humanists and social scientists to do that in a multidisciplinary way. So not just this is the space for English, but these are spaces for students that for these kinds of projects. And the third, to me, the most important thing is, and as we try to expand, we're about 28% domestic students of color and about a similar number of first-generation college students. This has been part of the institution's long-term mission to serve students that have not necessarily come from privileged educational backgrounds. They don't always arrive at Grinnell feeling like they belong here, and creating the kinds of community spaces that engage them, and particularly spaces where they don't have to go open the door and say, this is only for English majors, but the building is just there for them, and make them feel like they belong as a part of this learning community is a really important thing.
Clemson is going to be hard for you to say where the future is for you, because one might say you're there already, but what next? And then I'm going to ask
which one are you going to do?
Yeah, well, Barbara and I were just talking about this, and there's two or three things that come to mind. One is that when you put in technology like this, what does it matter? What changes occur in the student learning environment? So assessment is going to be an important part of how we inform ourselves and we inform the rest of the campus on what technology can do to enhance learning. The other part is that this building had the largest contributions from external donors of any building on campus to date, and we've got some very, very large donors. They're big companies. They're international, global type companies, all the way down to smaller activities that were in the state here. But how do you get them fully engaged with moving this to the next level? We hosted a Disruptive Technology Forum last week to try to bring them together and now figure out, how do you get the campus to move in the direction of disruptive technologies that are associated with our donors?
Yeah, and I'll say something else about the donors and generally the industry connections here. In moving my creative inquiry undergraduate research program to the Watt, we gained an unexpected advantage. Because we are such an exciting new building and because we're so visible, we get a lot of outside people coming in. Consequently, we've gotten a lot of outside industries interested in engaging with our students on projects. And these aren't task-oriented projects, but rather we ask businesses, do you have a problem or a topic that you would like to see a lot of creative young minds applied to? And the students really enjoy doing things that they see as having real-world applications. So that's a brand new phase of undergraduate research that we are pursuing. Our students like it. It gives us a better connection to the community, and it actually makes the people outside of Clemson look at us differently, because it's a demonstration to the outside world and in truth to the students themselves that what you learn in a university actually has application to your outside life and to the state. So that's been an interesting add-on to kind
of. One of the questions that emerged in the early years of the Learning Spaces Collaboratory is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That usually when you start thinking about learning spaces, the first question the planning team, the stakeholders, the small group of rabble-rousers should be addressing is, what do we want our students to become? And I think, Barbara, you just answered that question. And how to make that happen is, and you both answered that question in this conversation. So I would like to invite, let me start by saying, I got a call this morning from a Barbara or a Jim at a small university in the States, and the faculty, it was 2 faculty members who were frustrated that their administrators couldn't see the difference that good spaces make. And they're kind of wrestling with how to tell the story beyond data about what difference. And so I'd like to end this. No, first let me go back to ask Rick and Floyd make some final comments of how they are thinking in new ways about the future, about architects working with clients and kind of helping clients push the envelope. And then I'd like to end with all 5 of you kind of giving advice to me and to advice to the people joining us on the webinar to how to make the case that this really matters. So first, let's go with Floyd and then Rick, and then we'll about pushing the future for architects and working with clients, and then we'll end with comments about how do you make the case that this really matters. So Floyd, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I think to answer your first question, I think it's really about continuing to be visionary, with our clients, and having a real good process to look back and understand how we've got to where we are right now, but then start to think about how we're moving forward and how we provide flexibility and how we move forward when creating and providing spaces. So having those real good conversations at the beginning, having continuing to make sure the right people are in the room, the right stakeholders are involved and the right voices are heard, that student voices are heard, that we're understanding, how our kids, I have a 5- and a 6-year-old, how are they learning? Right now they'll walk up to any TV, an old TV, and they'll want to touch it and expect it to do something. Well, not every TV does that, but that's what they expect. And that's what they learn, that's what they know. And so we have to think about that when we build a building that our kids are going to be going into in the next 10 to 15 years. And so just continuing that process with our clients. And then when we get opportunities like we had on Clemson, where we're able to go cutting edge with certain things and do some things that are new and unique, going back and learning and seeing and witnessing how professors are doing new things and taking those new things and showing how people are using furniture and glass walls in unique ways to change how they communicate to students, and passing that on to other clients and really sharing that and using avenues like this, this webinar and this group that you have, Jeannie, to really learn from it and share that information as we move forward from project to project.
Rick?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Floyd. I appreciate those comments. I think to build on that, I think do what you can to learn from others. Since Jeannie started Project Kaleidoscope in '89 and had the first facilities workshop in 1992 that I think Grinnell was an attendee at, Jim was there, there's been a lot that has gone on in the world of undergraduate science or STEM facilities. So learn from others, participate in sessions like this, go to conferences and webinars on relevant topics, and whenever you can, tour other projects. If you're on a summer vacation and you're in an area where there might be a couple of new buildings, go check them out. Usually when we're starting a project as part of a team, we'll recommend taking tours of other facilities, and even if it means a road trip to go somewhere else to find good facilities to look at, and really develop a common vocabulary between the design team and the owner team, because we each have our own lingo. and we can talk about things, point out features, and try to get them to articulate not only what they like and would like to replicate, but maybe what they don't like, because even if a facility was perfect for the institution where it was built, it won't necessarily be perfect for everybody else, so there's no shame in pointing out something that you would like not to do that really doesn't work for you, and use that as a communication and learning tool.
Thanks, Rick. We're going to let you start with one sentence, one bit of advice to give to me to post on the LSC website. Why do spaces matter?
Spaces matter because people matter. You know, the students, as Floyd said, he's got 5- and 6-year-old kids. My kids that were born as we started Jim's project back in '89 and '93 are now out of college themselves. So things are different, and space really influences how people learn, how they act, how they react, and so I really see a strong relevance between space and people and how they develop.
Jim?
I guess I would just reinforce that. I moved into one of the new classrooms that we showed in the middle, between semesters of teaching the same students in organic chemistry, and they just acted different because they were in a different kind of a space that sent the message to them, which they didn't even know it, that they were supposed to be actively engaged as opposed to be passive. So it's not just the mechanics of it working better, it sends a really important message that of how you engage.
Floyd?
They took my answer. I think space matters because, you know, space is everywhere. You know, space is all around us, and what we have the privilege of doing is shaping that space. And we shape that space for people. We shape that space for uses. We shape that space to impact various outcomes. And in this case,
too much technology from Clemson.
Too much technology from Clemson. There we go.
There we go.
Sorry. So
Dennis, you
yeah.
comment?
I'm sorry?
I think we're going to pass Clemson because...
Sure. Well, we can hear you just fine. We had a mic that wasn't muted. But did you want us to comment as well?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I would say that, spaces are critical in communications. They're critical to relationship building, and in turn, both of those critical to learning. And it really needs to be an integrated look at this from the use to the design and everything else in between.
And I'd say that in part on a campus or almost anywhere else, what a space looks like is sometimes a statement or is sometimes taken as a statement of the importance of any particular activity. Now that shouldn't be, but any student coming to Grinnell's newly renovated space or to the Watt, it sends a message that the institution values what they are doing and wants to encourage what they're doing. So as we look for the future of higher education, we need to be looking forward, not so much serving a customer base, but actually looking at what the needs of a different kind of student population is going to want from us. And so I think the considerations of space are going to be more and more important in years to come.
Thanks, the 5 of you. We appreciated learning about each of your projects. I particularly appreciate your willingness to respond to questions that you didn't know you were going to be asked with such elegance and inspiring us all to think about this differently. As you know, each of you will receive a copy of this webinar. You can share it with your on-campus communities. I know there's one organization represented here, and that can be shared freely with people in your organization, in your region, maybe to spark a conversation on campus that are just thinking about learning spaces, and at the early end of the yardstick of planning. So our next public event for the LSC is at May 10th, and this is going to be a conversation. There's going to be no webinar, no visuals except what are posted on the website prior to the conversation. We're just going to talk about important issues. You can speak to the speakers, to those facilitating the conversation, and we'll obviously have a copy of that too. And so that will continue the conversation. The first conversation, we're going to talk about a question that has come up in at least 2 or 3 of these 8 roundtables that we've had so far. What do you do with the increasing diversity of our students? And the roundtable at the University, North Carolina State University, it was the question of how do you plan for spaces in which the invisible student feels he or she belongs. And it was a very interesting discussion, and a similar discussion happened at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. So rather than, thinking about students as groups of students, go back more quietly in the planning of thinking of students as individual learners with different backgrounds, career aspirations. And so that's going to be an interesting conversation, and I invite you to join us for that. I also invite anybody in the D.C. area to join us at the National Science Foundation on May 4th for a lunch discussion with some of the LSC community, having conversations between themselves and with the National Science Foundation about the question about why spaces matter. So I appreciate your joining us today, and I keep in touch if you have questions. I don't know if the email addresses of our facilitators are not on the screen, but Jennifer will add them to the email that comes out, the mailing that comes out to you attached to the webinar today. So thank you very much. Join us again, and be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you.